What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Saturday Morning College Football Show here on RotoGrinders. Happy to be with you as we are each and every week leading up to kickoff. About a month left of the regular season in college football, so conference play nearing the back half of the season here, and we'll look to see if we can still make some money down the stretch. Of course, I am Justin Van Zuiden, STL Cardinals 84. Sorry that I missed all of you last week. We got another member of the family, added a new puppy last Saturday. So thanks to Chop for filling in for me on short notice. And John Laub alongside as usual. John, how you been?
I'm doing great. Congratulations on new family members. Saw on Twitter. So cute. So that's great. And I'm real excited about today's slate. You know, we got these big conference games. We got some G5 teams on the slate that people may or may not be familiar with. Last week, we had a shootout between JMU and Georgia State, which really changed the slate and everything. So looking forward to today, Justin.
Yeah, it should be a fun afternoon of football. And kudos to DraftKings for not putting the Iowa game on the main slate. So the Rutgers-Iowa game currently sitting at a 28.5 point total, which Iowa continues to set new records for low totals and offensive futility pretty much every week. But we don't have to deal with that game on the DraftKings main slate. We do have 12 games to go through today. Of course, as we get to the end of the show, we'll take any questions you might have, and we will take a peek through the FanDuel slate as well. Some of the later night games on the FanDuel slate. USC and Oregon kind of headlining the fantasy goodness for the night games tonight with a 77-point total in that game. Nothing really, to that extent in the afternoon games, but we do have a couple of intriguing high totals with Oklahoma State and UCF, Washington State and Cal, a couple games that could feature some points. So let's go ahead and dig into it here. And if we start at the top range of quarterbacks, I think this is one of the rare slates where we haven't seen a high-end quarterback getting a lot of the ownership. If you look at the top 5 priced quarterbacks, you've got Michael Penix in a tough matchup today, his toughest matchup of the year against Utah. Jordan Travis, Shedeur Sanders, obviously Colorado has cooled off. J.J. McCarthy in a low total game. Jalen Milroe in a low total game against a decent Kentucky defense. So, I mean, I think most people are probably just going to skip over that top tier of quarterbacks today. Are you interested in any of them?
I'll say in my cash game lineups, I don't have any of these quarterbacks. You know, I don't really love the matchups. You know, sometimes when you get into these conference games, maybe the scoring's down a little bit. The defense knows the offense a little bit better. I'm not sold on Shedeur Sanders lately. Colorado hasn't shown us much. And J.J. McCarthy, I wonder what his ceiling is, you know. So, and against Penn State, that's a very difficult matchup. So I'm off it now. For GPP, this is very interesting because you just mentioned it, Justin. One incredible low ownership. And the player that I'm interested in is Jalen Milroe. I mean, it's time. We haven't talked about him. I just think the college universe hasn't talked about him. Alabama's playing very good football. They look like they're on a trajectory to play Georgia in the SEC championship game. And you can make an argument that Milroe is their MVP right now. He has slate breaking upside. Now, the matchup is challenging at Kentucky. I get it. But he could run for 80, 90 yards and 1 or 2 touchdowns. He's the player that I like at less than or about 3% ownership. I think that's outstanding in GPP.
Yeah, I think he's interesting. Certainly a little bit more of a risk-reward play in the matchup today. Kentucky's going to try to slow that game down and not feature a ton of plays. But if he can make some big plays, particularly if he can get one with his legs or something, always some GPP upside there. I'm always a little bit higher than the field on Jordan Travis. I think he's playable as well, especially if you want to pair him up, with a receiver at double low ownership there. Potentially in some GPPs. So Travis, Milroe, potential GPP options there. But I think most people are going to just skip over that range at quarterback today to head down into the next group. So if we go to kind of the mid-range of quarterbacks, say from 7,500 to 8,500, You've got Cameron Ward, who's popping in projections. You've got Plumlee, who's popping in projections. Michael Pratt popping in projections. Other viable guys in that range like Brady Cook, Joe Milton. So plenty of interesting names in here. Do you have a favorite or two in the $7,500 to $8,500 pricing tier?
My favorite play, it took me a while to come around, is Cameron Ward at home against California. The Golden Bears, I think they're giving up over 300 passing yards a game to opposing quarterbacks. If you've seen California play football, they're not very good on the defensive end, and we tend to get these high-scoring games. Now, I was actually hoping for a little bit lower ownership because Cameron Ward had that 2-game slump, right, where he produced, I think, in single digits. So we have a wide range of outcomes here. But the matchup is so good with such an implied total, 28.5, and we know they're going to throw the football. So I love Cameron Ward here. If you have not seen Michael Pratt play, and last year, if you saw the Rose Bowl, you were probably impressed by Tajay Spears. Michael Pratt is a very, very good college quarterback. I think he's going to get drafted in the NFL on day 2. I like him a lot. He has rushing upside. And what do we got? A 38.5 implied total with Michael Pratt of Tulane. And I do believe that defense at Tulsa is also giving up over 300 passing yards a game. I mean, they're really brutal on the back end. So I like Ward and Pratt the most.
If you're playing Pratt in tournaments, is there a receiver that you like to pair him with, or you just play him on his own? How are you handling that?
I have a lineup with Pratt, and he's on his own because they basically have 3 receivers that they kind of, I can't tell you any one week. Early in the year, it was Jackson. Then it looked like it was Keys, and now they've been spreading the ball around. So I don't like him. I think you can play him naked because of the rushing upside, Justin.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and have built a lineup with the same logic there. I mean, certainly you could try to play the guessing game with the pass catchers, but I think I'm going to pass on that today as well. Any of the others you like in there? Plumlee, I mean, at 7,500, is he on your radar today?
Absolutely, my friend. I like Plumlee, and I think he's gotten over 50 yards rushing the last 2 weeks. Remember, we saw him stop running because he had an injury. I think he missed 1 or 2 weeks. He was injured. Then when he came back, he really wasn't running. But as long as we got that upside, right, with his legs, I like Plumlee. It looks like he's back. I actually think this is a sneaky game, Oklahoma State versus UCF. Because it's at UCF, I like Plumlee even more here. I do believe Oklahoma State's going to put up points, so I think that'll force the Knights to be more active on offense and put points up. And, slate breaker, I know he drives me crazy, but Jason Bean of Kansas, I think one week when we talked about him like 4 weeks ago, he ended up scoring over 40 points in a game. Now he can also go out and get you an 18-point spot, right? So he's very frustrating. But Jason Bean, he has a 33 implied total. They're playing Texas Tech. I like Jason Bean. He's very interesting.
All right. Some solid mid-range options there. And I agree on that UCF Oklahoma State game in total as a whole. Definitely one you can stack up and get some exposure to in your GPP builds if you're looking to correlate a bunch of plays from that game. And then Bean is right there at 7,400 as well. The rest of the mid-range, I guess Klubnik also kind of qualifies in there. He'll be an option some people use, but I'm not really feeling that. They're favored by about 2 touchdowns today. So I think I'm out on Klubnik. I'd rather go cheap. You've got the lineup HQ, all dots colored on Arizona's quarterback Noah today. Against that woeful Colorado defense. Arizona has certainly surpassed expectations this year. They're projected for 32 points today. All of their skill players are reasonably affordable. You've got Mendoza at 5,500 as well, who's really cheap. Your thoughts on the value quarterback options here?
Now, I like both of these quarterbacks, but I do have FIFA more than Mendoza. I would say, like, if I have 4 lineups, 3 have FIFA, 1 has Mendoza, because I think California has a better running game. So I do kind of think that we could talk about Jade or not, but I think less likely to throw 4 touchdowns. Arizona, they're going into Colorado. Now, while Colorado has played a little better defensively the last 2 weeks, Justin, I don't believe in the Colorado defense. And maybe they just flip the script enough so that they don't get, allow 45 points. But man, Arizona's been one of the great stories. FIFA is a freshman. He took over the job when Jaden DeLora got injured, and it doesn't look like DeLora is going to win the job back. So I love FIFA in this matchup. I love that implied total. It doesn't look like Michael Wiley's going to play. He's highly questionable. So I do think they're going to throw the ball a lot against Colorado. And again, another sneaky game where if that Colorado defense doesn't come through, we might get this up into this high 60s by the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Colorado, if this game would have been played a month ago, the total would have probably been, 6 or 8 points higher than it is. So good value quarterback options today. The salary, navigating the salary cap is a little bit tricky on this slate. So, not that you have to play both of those cheap quarterbacks. I think I have one lineup that has both of them, but if you play one of them, at least it does open up some salary for the rest of your roster building here today. Any other quarterback plays that we have missed or that you want to hit on before we move to the next position?
The only player I think is only GPP. I would not play him in cash. Haynes King. If you've not been watching the Georgia Tech quarterback who transferred from Texas A&M, man, is he good with his legs. I think he's in the top 5 rushing quarterbacks for yards this year, and they are an underdog against Clemson. So Haynes King has a ceiling that is very enticing. I do not like him in cash because his floor could be really low if Clemson just grinds out this game and limits, opportunity for the Yellow Jackets. But Haynes King is a very interesting option.
All right. Don't mind that call in GPPs as well. Let's go ahead and move to the running back position where, frankly, there's one name at the top that's going to stand above everybody else. Corum against Penn State is probably a pass. It hasn't had the year everyone expected. Not playing Ray Davis against Alabama. So, I mean, if you're talking the top guys on the board, pretty amazing what Ollie Gordon has done for Oklahoma State. Started to hear him. It's probably not going to happen because his first few weeks were so, before he kind of had the job full time, were so. But started to get a little bit of Heisman buzz. He's had a couple of 200-yard games here this past month. Just incredible. Now he gets the Kansas defense today. I mean, I don't see how you choose anybody other than Ollie Gordon as the number 1 overall running back on the board here on this slate.
Without question. And if you're like, I'm sure you watch ESPN on Saturday mornings, College Game Day. I know I love it. And they had him, he's plus 5,000 for the Heisman, but they actually did a big segment. They were talking a lot about Ollie Gordon. You know what's crazy, Justin? His last 3 games are against such bad defenses. BYU, UCF, and I forgot the third one. But man, does he have an enticing finish to this year. He might be owned in 70% in cash games. Justin, with that floor, last week we saw probably floor, what did he have, 30 points? But we have a ceiling of 50. I just can't pass him up in cash games. And can you believe we're sitting here this late in November and Blake Corum, I don't think I've had him since week 2 in a cash game lineup because he just isn't getting the upside. He's not getting that multiple. Last year we were seeing, 150 yards and 3 touchdowns at times. We haven't gotten that at all this year from Blake Corum.
Yeah, I haven't gotten anything really remotely close to that. I mean, and it's not like Edwards has been good either. Like Corum, 44 yards, 59 yards, 52 yards, 69 yards, 74 yards, 97 yards, 80, 73. So he's had one 100-yard game, and that was 101 yards against Bowling Green.
Wow.
The touchdowns have saved him, but I mean, it's just if you're only going for 50 yards and a couple scores, isn't really getting the job done when you're the highest priced running back on the board, and he doesn't really catch passes either. So it's crazy how I guess when you compare to what he did last year, how Corum has fallen. So out on Corum myself as well. Totally fine with Gordon. I mean, he's a lock if you're playing cash games today. The only other guy in the kind of that stratosphere that's a similar price is probably Taj Brooks. Maybe you could throw Jaden Ott in there as well. Devin Neal projects fairly good. So, if you're looking to go double spend at running back, you're probably going to have to for sure take one of those cheap QBs. But Brooks, Ott, Devin Neal, any of those kind of a 1B option after Gordon for you?
My 1B is Devin Neal. We'll talk about him a little bit more a little later. I love him. But one player that I think I'm looking now. I don't like the matchup Dylan Johnson has against Utah. And, I kind of got lucky on the night slate. I had pivoted from Penix to Dylan Johnson. Now, I didn't expect 250 and 4 touchdowns against USC, but that was just unbelievable. He's not, you can't expect that ceiling against Utah. But look at what we got for ownership, Justin. We have them right now at less than 1%. They are at home. And you still have a 29 implied total. Just if you're looking at GPP to pivot out of this group, Dylan Johnson is just everyone's, and I don't expect a big day, but you know what? We know there's variance in this game. We've seen a ceiling. I just think it's fascinating how low owned he is.
Yeah, I mean, Washington as a whole, not a whole lot of people playing them today. So if there was ever a shot to get them at low ownership, you can certainly do that. And you mentioned the big day that Johnson had against USC. I mean, I think USC could play with 12 guys on defense and they would still give up 4 touchdowns a game. It's insane how bad that defense is.
You know what? I've actually thought out just quickly, I thought quickly how bad Lincoln Riley. I mean, you can't be that bad on defense, Justin. You have to be a complete coach. It's so bad. Oh my God.
I mean, they're lucky if they force 1 punt a game. It's insane. It's good for Caleb Williams putting up numbers, I guess, if you want to play him every week. But that's about all it's good for. So anyway, USC's only on the night slate tonight, or the FanDuel slate. You don't have to worry about them on the main slate here on DraftKings today. Okay, so I agree with that kind of middle range. I think Brooks is great. I think Neal is great. And, it's just tough to fit them in together with Gordon, and Gordon's gonna be ahead of them in terms of my interest level. All right, if we go into the next range, this kind of the 6K range of running backs, not a whole lot here. We are still waiting on injury news for Darius Taylor for Minnesota. We do have him in projections right now, and he's not the play. I mean, obviously, it's just a matter of if Taylor's out, do you want to play the backup running back? Newbin for Minnesota. That's a later kick, 3:30, I believe. Yeah, let's see. Trying to find it. Yeah, 3:30. So we probably won't have that up until kickoff. So you just got to guesstimate, maybe put him in your flex spot, have a couple of 2v2s ready if you're waiting on that Minnesota injury situation. Otherwise, we've got RJ Harvey, Jace McClellan, Cody Schrader kind of as the 6K options today. Any interest for you there?
I do like Cody Schrader. I was stunned. I did not play him last week against Georgia, and he was really good against the Bulldogs. He surprisingly had a great year. I think he's got 900 yards rushing now. He's the goal line back from Missouri. He's basically their pass catching back. I mean, he's incredible. That's a good price on him if you want to differentiate against Tennessee. I do like Schrader. Now, the Tennessee matchup isn't great because the Volunteers are actually, isn't it wild to watch the transition last year with that high-scoring offense? The Volunteers were incredible with Hendon Hooker, and now they're really kind of a running game and a defensive-oriented game. But the volume is so big for Schrader. I do like him here against the Volunteers, and I didn't realize this. Last year, the Volunteers put up 62 points on Missouri. I think Missouri's going to come out here and try to punch Tennessee in the face. I know it's narrative street, but I do believe sometimes there are teams that can get motivated, and I think the Tigers are going to be motivated here. The Missouri Tigers, I should say. They're both Tigers.
Lots of Tigers down there in the SEC. All right. Yeah, I think Schrader is absolutely a solid point per dollar play there at 6K. I do like and again, we've got another rainbow colored guy that everybody likes in lineup HQ with Mekhi Hughes. We haven't seen Tulane a whole lot on these main slates, but a price tag that's a little bit too cheap for him at 5,800. I know people might have questions on how to handle the Clemson running back situation. We were kind of hoping, or I shouldn't say hoping for an injury, but we'd have a lot more clarity if Shipley was out again this week, as Phil Maffa had 36 carries for 186 yards and 2 touchdowns against Notre Dame last week. So a big game from him. But as far as I know, let's see. I'm going to refresh for the latest update here. Shipley is cleared the concussion protocol and is expected to play. So, I mean, obviously Maffa isn't just going to go away after having a huge game. They're probably going to split. Like, I just don't love trying to figure out the Clemson situation on DraftKings. Shipley is mispriced on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, I think I'm just going to pass on Shipley and Maffa both at this point, and just play Hughes in that range. I mean, just take the path of least resistance. Any thoughts on the 5K range here for you?
Well, Mekhi Hughes is definitely the player in my cash game lineups. He's a freshman. I think he's gotten 400 or 500-yard games in like the last 6 or 7. He's been really good for Tulane. I think the question is, do you want to play Hughes and Pratt? We had mentioned before, are there any receivers that I don't like any of the receivers? You could go with the salary savings and with a 38 implied total against one of the worst defenses in the nation. Tulsa's really bad. So you could go Pratt and Hughes. If not, if you don't want to go Pratt, I definitely love Hughes. I think him and Ollie Gordon are going to be a very, very popular backfield duo today. I think that's going to be highly owned. I think he's a great player. Now, Shipley Maffa, I agree with you. In cash games, Justin, I had to take both of them out. But I'll say this. For GPP, Maffa's the guy who I want. I was looking at more stats, breaking them down between these two players. Maffa leads the Tigers in yards and touchdowns. Now, obviously, last week's big game helps. But, this is kind of like the eyeball test, having watched Clemson. Unfortunately, I've had to watch them a lot for various reasons, right? They're not that fun, but they're always on TV, and I'm watching a lot of Clemson. My eyeball test says Maffa's the better player. He's better between the tackles. I think he's bigger, stronger. He's the more powerful back. Why do I mention that? Georgia Tech is the second worst run defense in the nation. We have a home favorite. Even if Shipley plays, he has been the first half running back most of the year. Maffa seems to be the guy late in the game and goal line. So if you're looking for a GPP differentiator, I think Maffa's very interesting because we talked about Klubnik, right? I'm not playing Klubnik. I think they might run the ball 45 times today against Georgia Tech because they just can't handle, I think, the Clemson running game.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with both guys healthy. I mean, they might give both of them 15 carries today. We'll see. In cash games, just play Hughes. If you want to take a shot on the Clemson guys, definitely just in GPPs. As I mentioned, Shipley is really cheap on FanDuel. If you want to play him over there, that's probably fine. The rest of the 5K range, I mean, I wish I could find a guy to like in here, but I really don't. We don't have anybody projected above 15 fantasy points. Jalen Wright's projection is okay, but there's just not a whole lot else until you get in. You might as well at that stage just go down super cheap. Anybody against Colorado is viable. So you've got Jonah Coleman there at 4,300. And I mentioned, pending the injury news for Minnesota at the running back position, you've got Newbin at 4K. If he draws a start, we know he'll get a good amount of work. So is there anybody on the cheap that you feel okay about here?
Did I maybe I missed? Did you say Jonah Coleman?
I did. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. We have him projected at 36% ownership. If you've watched Jonah Coleman, he's a big player. I think he's 225 or 230, Justin. Like, he is powerful. And playing Colorado, I mean, they could all score points in this matchup, right? I mean, I think the projection is 32. I think they might be able to hit 35, 38 points. So I think there's plenty to go around here. And what I was looking at message boards and been looking around all morning, I don't think Michael Wiley, we haven't gotten official news, but I don't think Michael Wiley's going to play today. I can't find anything concrete. But if I had to make a decision now, I think Coleman's the guy. If you want to go really cheap down there, I do like him. And then everyone else, I don't like the Tennessee backfield. The problem is they play three guys, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I would like to play one. I mean, you could try to hit the right guy, but all these at this price, you could also have a floor of 5 points. You mentioned how bad Donovan Edwards has been. There's no way I'm taking him this year. So there really isn't anyone in here at this price range that I like.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, outside of Coleman and potentially Newbin, it's just tough. I'd rather go trying to hunt down a punt option at the wide receiver position if you have to. So speaking of, let's go ahead and move there. Only 2 wide receivers priced above 7K today, and they're at 8,100 and 8,900, and they're the 2 Washington guys facing Utah. So you're going to get almost no ownership there, and that is a steep price point. I mean, obviously GPPs, we talked about Dylan Johnson, we talked about Penix. You can certainly play these guys. But salary is just a little bit too prohibitive for me today. Do you have any interest in these Washington guys, or are we just going down under 7,000?
I'm going down in cash games. They're both very good, and the matchup is difficult with Utah, so I'm not going to pay that over 8K. I think it's too much. I do agree with GPP. If you want to go with that low ownership, I think taking one. I'm an Odunze guy. Even though you could argue that Polk has been just as good, if not better, especially second half of the year so far. But I'd go Odunze if I had to in a GPP.
Yeah, definitely my preference of the 2 as well if you're picking the between them. But otherwise, heading down into the 6Ks, you've got the Arizona wide receivers there. I mentioned I don't mind Florida State, so I don't mind taking a shot on Keon Coleman, even though Wilson's back. Luther Burden, I mean, he can put up 100 yards any week and score a couple touchdowns. The Arizona guys will certainly be the popular options. Who are your favorite kind of 6 to 7K guys?
I definitely like the 2 Arizona guys, Cowing and McMillan. Now, I've seen a lot of people have been asking me if they can play both of them. I'm not willing to play both, but I understand in the matchup why. You know, if they want to stack the Arizona passing game, I understand why. It's not how I build my cash game lineups, but I get it. I've chosen McMillan 3 out of 4 lineups over Cowing. McMillan is the bigger home run hitter. I think he's the better player. Cowing gets peppered, but like his yards per catch are really low. And, you know, I do like having a higher ceiling. So I like McMillan because he gives me the higher ceiling. I do like Keon Coleman. We did get confirmation he's going to play today, right, Justin? I saw that correctly early. It looks like he's going to suit up.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So that's a great option at a pretty fair price. I like that.
Confirm that both Coleman and Wilson are active today.
And that makes your Jordan Travis call even more interesting because now he has all of his weapons. So I like that. Now, interesting here. No one's talking about these Colorado receivers. Look at Xavier Weaver at 3%, 4% ownership right now. If you do believe Arizona is going to put the ball in the air and put points on the board, you know, Colorado is home. We have seen the ceiling with Shedeur Sanders in this offense. So I think Weaver's very fascinating at such a low ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can certainly run that back too. If you've got a lineup with some Arizona exposure, you want the game to stay somewhat competitive, so you can play one of those Colorado guys as a run back. Definitely don't mind that in some tournament builds as well. All right, let's go ahead and move down into the next range where you'll find in the 5Ks all sorts of intriguing options. We've got the Oklahoma State receivers are here. Presley and Owens are both in the 5Ks. Basically, all 3 guys for Washington State are priced a couple $100s apart. Kelly at 56, Williams at 57, Victor at 58. Sounds like Victor's going to be good to go today. He's been a little bit banged up. Squirrel White in here. Jeremiah Hunter against the Washington State in here. I mean, this is where you kind of go to get some of your value. Just mentioned maybe 6 or 7 names there. You got a couple of favorites out of this 5K bunch.
Yeah, and I like this. I like this grouping. I like coming down to this value. My number 1 in 3 of 4 cash game lineups is Lincoln Victor. He just gets peppered with too many targets. Now, you could argue the ceiling if he isn't scoring touchdowns, because I think he gets like what the last 3 games have been incredible for the number of receptions. I mean, 12, 9, and 16 receptions, but he's only scored once, right? So there is, maybe you don't have the upside touchdown, but I like Washington State to score more. They haven't had the highest scoring games. You know, Stanford, they only put up a 7 spot. ASU, they scored 27, Oregon 24. So maybe we get more touchdowns in this game against Cal, which would increase the odds of Lincoln Victor getting in. If we can get the touchdown and all of those receptions, we're in really good shape. So I like Lincoln Victor here, not in GPP. He's a smash in cash because I think he's going to be too owned. I would pivot elsewhere. But I do like Brennan Presley. I've been playing him in my regular season college fantasy football. I dabbled with him a little bit in DFS games when he's on the slate because he does get overlooked with Ollie Gordon. I think most of us just kind of, I got my Washington or my Oklahoma State player. Brennan Presley's been pretty good in the last month. We have very low ownership at a 34 implied total. So I like Presley also, my friend.
Yeah, I like the call on that. You know, he's going to be a little bit lower owned, solid option that doesn't cost a whole lot more than Owen. So don't hate throwing him in some lineups as well today. All right, so let's go ahead and move down and kind of round out the wide receiver discussion here. I see Daniel Jackson for Minnesota has kind of emerged as their wide receiver 1. Theo Wees, if you're looking to go a little bit cheaper than Burden for some Missouri exposure. Deion Burks always seems to pop a little bit in our projections. And then once you get down to the 4Ks, there's not a whole lot here. Let's see. We've got go ahead.
I have one cheap who I'm playing in 2 of my cash game lineups. It's a little bit risky. Coy Eakin of Texas Tech. I was actually kind of surprised when I was looking at some of his totals in his last 4 games, 15, 3, 18, and 10 points. I do think that Texas Tech Kansas game is going to be a little bit high scoring, right? So I do think they're going to throw the ball in the air. Last week, Eakin had 8 receptions for 78 yards. I know it's risky, but at 3,800, if you're looking to pay up for those running backs, I like the cash saving here for Eakin. I want to put him in every cash game, Bill, but I have him in 2 out of 4 just because at 3,800, we don't need much to get 3 times value.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't mind throwing him in some tournament lineups myself, even just because of the salary savings. It's just tough to find. There was one other guy I was looking for on the Lawrence Arnold for Kansas. I've got in a few lineups, especially a couple where I have been.
Oh yeah.
You know, he's kind of emerged as their number 1 guy. It's not pretty,
No.
but if you're looking for something to fill out some cheap exposure, I think he's certainly fine to throw in some builds as well. All right, it's that time of the show where people might ask, I'm just tuning in. Where can I get the guys that I absolutely have to put in my DraftKings lineups today? And we'll throw it to John for his Fantastic 4 today. John, what you got?
All right, go to our optimizer, and I got 4 great plays for our Fantastic 4. You can build cash game lineups with these 4 players. We talked about him earlier. I love Noah Fifta. I think he's just a smash in cash games. I am a 2 quarterback build, and if you do want to differentiate, you could go 4 running backs, but I do like the upside with the 2 quarterbacks. So I'm going to go with Fifta at one of the quarterbacks without question in all my lineups. I love Devin Neal. We didn't really talk about him yet, Justin. He is so good. He's so dangerous with the home runs. Now, he's not a volume guy, everyone. He is an efficiency player. He does so much with limited touches. I like Devin Neal a lot against Texas Tech. I do think we haven't talked much about that game. I think that has a sneaky game. I think there's going to be some offensive fireworks there. We talked earlier today about Mekhi Hughes. I'm all in. I've watched a lot of Tulane. I've been scouting Michael Pratt. And as I've been scouting Pratt this year for draft profiles, Mekhi Hughes has popped up to me. I like him. He's very interesting. Put him in your cash games. And I'm going to Torian McMillan of Arizona. I'm going to go for the price savings. We talked about him before. McMillan's, to me, has the higher ceiling of Cowing, and I think we're saving about 4,000, right? 6.7 to 6.3. I think that's the saving. So put those four in our optimizer, and you can spit out up to 20 different lineups for your cash games today.
All right, good stuff. We'll go ahead and move over to FanDuel here. FanDuel has included some of the better late night games on their slate. Actually don't have the USC Oregon game on their main slate, so you'll have to get the night slates in order to get exposure to that. But we do have the Ole Miss Georgia game. That'd be one of the better games of the day. Maybe not necessarily from a fantasy perspective, but from a real life perspective. West Virginia, Oklahoma. Florida, LSU, Texas, TCU, Duke, UNC are the late night games that FanDuel has added to their slate. And if we talk about quarterbacks over on FanDuel, I mean, Jaden Daniels and Dylan Gabriel and Drake May are the three kind of big names that you add over there on that slate. Any additional thoughts on quarterback on FanDuel?
You know, I've actually grown doing the show with you all year. I've grown to really like the FanDuel concept of the whole day. It opens it up. I like it. I mostly play on DraftKings, but I do, since I've had to research the FanDuel, I kind of like the difference of the two. And look at this pricing sometimes. I like Drake May a ton tonight. He's the guy. He's 10.6. He's only 5th on the slate at quarterback. So I like him a ton. His ceiling is almost Jaden Daniels. Like, he can do it. He's so solid. I was looking at his numbers. Like, he's got over 30 points on FanDuel so many times. He's almost guaranteed 24 points on FanDuel. I love Drake May against Duke here. I think this is a great spot for him, and he's not available on the main slate for DraftKings. So I like him. And I love looking at the difference in pricing. We just talked about Noah Fifta. Look at that. He's the 7th highest priced quarterback on FanDuel, Justin. I don't have him in any of my cash game lineups, but the difference in pricing, I love just looking at it and seeing the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It is crazy how some guys are so different on FanDuel. Like, if Will Shipley is only 7K on FanDuel, even though, Maffa is obviously the guy after last week that people will be talking about. He's $1,000 more expensive than Shipley on FanDuel, so I think that's interesting. We'll talk about these other positions here on FanDuel. I'm scrolling through for questions here. Mr. Richard says he wants to play Milroe, but at 9K on DraftKings. Yeah, we talked about his price. Certainly fine for GPPs, but tough for cash games. Somebody mentioned that Ollie Gordon is minus 750 to score a touchdown today, which is crazy.
Oh my God. I don't think I could do that.
Yeah,
minus
that's no
750.
Minus 750. Too much injury risk for a running back to lay minus 750. John asking about Mekhi Hughes, definitely one of the best point per dollar running back plays on the board. Alex Altman has a question. So his two options are Hughes and Weeze. That's option one. And option B is Newbin, the backup running back for Minnesota that might start today if Taylor's out, and Burden. So Hughes and Weeze or Newbin and Burden, which combo do you like better?
I'm going to go Hughes and Weeze, no question, in cash. I'd probably play them. Now, I do think if you're looking at GPP, Newbin and Burden is a really interesting differentiation, but I'm going to go Hughes and Weeze.
Yeah, I'd agree for now. I mean, keep an eye on that news. Burden's been a little banged up as well. I think he's fine, but you can certainly. I've got Burden in some GPP lineups, but Mr. Richard is also asking, Burden for DK3 max. I'd maybe put him on one, and roll him in there. And pretty low ownership, I think, compared to usual. For Burden today. So, all right, let's go back to the FanDuel talk here. And I did not flip the screen share over to FanDuel. Let me do that quickly. Sorry if anybody was following along after we did the Fantastic Four. I forgot to flip that over. So, all right, there you can see the quarterbacks that we just talked about. Scrolling through, I don't see a whole lot else that we didn't touch on already. So, all right, let's move to running backs here on FanDuel. Obviously, Gordon, still the most expensive guy, still the most popular guy. Taj Brooks, not a whole lot different at running back because the later night games don't necessarily have. In fact, if I just filter just by these later night games, the only running back that we have with two guys that have reasonable ownership are Jonathan Brooks, who I don't think I'd play over, the Gordon and some of those other guys. And then Imani Bailey at 7,200. I think you can play Bailey. I don't think you necessarily have to. Really not a whole lot of difference on FanDuel with running back versus receiver for me today, or FanDuel versus DraftKings at running back today.
No, the only guy we haven't mentioned who's an interesting option is a Marion Hampton. If you don't want to go Drake May, Hampton is a 32.5 implied total at home against Duke. Hampton's, I think I wrote he had 4 straight 100-yard games right now. I have him in my Fantastic Four for the night slate on DraftKings. I love him there. So if you want it, we have him at less than 1% ownership. I mean, look at the difference here on FanDuel. You have Gordon, which I get at 35%, Brooks at 17, Taj Brooks. Oh, we have Jonathan Brooks and Taj Brooks. And you have a Marion Hampton at 1% right now. I'm a big Hampton guy. I think he's very interesting if you want to do GPP, differentiate there.
All right. Let's see. Go ahead and flip to wide receiver now. I don't see a whole lot else there. Wide receiver, we add Neighbors to this slate. You add the Florida LSU game. You got Pearsall on the Florida side. You've got Wilson, who's been coming on for Florida. McConkey, who's one of the better targets now for Georgia with Bowers out. Xavier Worthy in here. Farouk is really cheap on FanDuel. I know he's kind of let me down this couple of the past games.
Me
but
too.
It's 6,400. Yeah, 6,400 on FanDuel. I'll probably go ahead and get burned for about a third straight week with him. But any additional FanDuel wide receiver thoughts for you?
There's a couple that we haven't mentioned. Eugene Wilson. Man, if you haven't watched him at Florida, he's been hooking me up a lot lately. He's been underpriced. Now, he is creeping up a little bit, and he seems to be higher on FanDuel than on DraftKings, but it's 7.5 against LSU. Hey, has anyone been watching LSU secondary, Justin? They're not good back there. And I can't believe I'm saying this. Graham Mertz is playing good football for the Florida Gators. Like I know you're out in the Midwest, right? We've all seen him at Wisconsin. I actually think he's one of the most shocking players in all college football this year. But man, with Pearsall and Wilson, he's putting up numbers, and Wilson is at a nice ownership, 13%. So I like the freshman here a lot. He might not have the ceiling, but I like him. And then there was, Adonai Mitchell. Huge game last week for the Texas Longhorns. I didn't realize this. I forgot. TCU destroyed Texas last year. I think Texas is motivated against TCU. They do want to make the playoff. They've got to win this game. Adonai Mitchell with Quinn Ewers back, there might be a little risk, but I do like him here in this matchup also.
All right, a couple notes. Darius Taylor sounds like he's going to be out today from a Minnesota beat source, so Newbin will probably get a bump in projections for sure. Let's see. Alabama receiver Jermaine Burton is sick and might not be able to play today. Unconfirmed report that Bowers might play. I haven't seen that, but that was just somebody in the chat.
I hear the same thing, unconfirmed with Bowers. It's hard to tell.
Hard to tell. College info, a little shaky to come by at times. Dexter in the YouTube chat is asking about cash QB options. I think most people are probably going to start with Ward or Pratt, Plumlee in there as well. And then if you're going 2 quarterbacks, Vita for Arizona, Mendoza for Cal, will be the 2 guys. So those kind of 4 or 5 options, depending on what you have for salary, are where most people are going in cash. All right. Denny is asking, how do we get different today? My favorite is getting some exposure to Florida State. Jordan Travis, Keon Coleman, they almost never carry a lot of ownership. How about you? What do you like to do to get different in your GPP builds today?
I have a nice stack of the Oklahoma UCF. I think you can go Plumlee. You can match it up with Javon Baker. I think that, Baker, right? The wide receiver Baker at UCF. And if you really want to differentiate in that game, go with Presley. You can take him. Now, I still think you can play Ollie Gordon in that. But I seem to be gravitating towards this Oklahoma UCF game. I think there's going to be some fireworks in that one.
Absolutely. I've got a stack of that game in my tournament as well. All right. If you like the show, lots of you watching this morning, we appreciate you doing that on a Saturday morning. And we'd also appreciate if you hit the thumbs up button on the YouTube. Help us stay relevant on the YouTube algorithms. Subscribe to the channel and get notifications whenever we go live. Always great content coming your way here at RotoGrinders. Would like to thank TJ for producing. Hard work behind the scenes for us, and never fun to get up early to do on a Saturday morning. So appreciate his willingness to help us out. And thanks to John for joining me as well. And with that, we're going to go ahead and log off for the day. For John, I'm Justin. Have a great Saturday, everybody, and we will catch you later.